Hey guys, welcome back to the Gloria Living channel. My name's Hannah and today we're going to be talking about pruning basil plants and then what to do once you get them pruned, how to dry those plants and use them in your kitchen all winter long. Okay guys, let's go check it out. Okay, so the other day I started recording a video at our large garden of our basil that's in the ground that is just way bigger than the basil we have here. Our basil and our herbs are finally taken off here, but it was just bigger in the ground than they were in the pots. So I went over there and I recorded a video. I showed you how to prune them and all the things. And you know what? I had issues with my microphone and I didn't have my microphone on. So I'm going to show you how to do it again today, show you some clips from what I did last week, but I'm also going to just show you again how to properly prune basil, to just give you some tips and tricks on how to properly prune it. That way you can have a great, successful basil harvest all throughout the summer. I do want to touch on the point of growing basil though, because you know, when you first get into gardening, herbs may not be the first thing you want to grow. Some people, that may be the thing that gets them into gardening, but herbs can sometimes be kind of something on the side, but they're really great to grow. If you have room to grow a lot of herbs, it can actually long-term save you money because some of these are even perennials that you can grow and dry and use fresh, and fresh herbs are so special in cooking. But we're going to be talking about basil today, and basil is not just an amazing aromatic, but just beautiful herb to smell, to see, and to taste, but it's also good for you. It's good for immunity building as well. It's good for your immunity. You can make it into tea. Certain kinds are great for tea, and it's also great for a lot of dishes. Sauce for pizza, whether that's spaghetti sauce or just some summer dishes, bruschettas and things like that. I use basil a lot in the kitchen, so I definitely want to grow a lot of it, dry a lot of it, so I can use a lot of it. Additionally, it's a great companion plant. It is sometimes used to try and steer away pests in the garden as well. People like to pair it next to tomatoes. Not only do they taste great together, but they're buddies in the garden and beneficial to be grown next to each other. People say that not only does the basil repel the pests that would like to eat your tomatoes, but I've even seen things that might suggest that they're beneficial for being more productive when they're next to each other. Now, I don't know whether any of that actually works out or not, but they certainly don't hurt each other to be next to each other, and they taste great and something you definitely want next to each other in the kitchen. Now, I'm going to show you one of our basil plants that we have in our container, and I just want to show you a few things. This is a blue spice basil. It is super, just kind of a hardy basil. It really wants to produce. I also am growing Genovese basil. This is the one we're experimenting with tea. I got it because I couldn't find the Tulsi basil, which is the holy basil. This almost has like sweet vanilla tones to it. It's really special. There's so many types of basil out here. But since this is my biggest plant that I have here, I want to show you how to prune it using this as my example. One of the things I want you to notice is when you see a top like this starting to form right here, this is the flower, okay? It is starting to flower, it's starting to go to seed. Anytime you see that on a basil plant, you want to take that off. Anytime you see flowering on plants that don't need flowers like this, sometimes people even do this with their potatoes as well, you just want to pick it off because you do not want it going to seed. It puts its energy into creating the seeds to reproduce rather than the plant. It's doing that because I have not been good about watering this plant. It's stressed out and it wants to go to seed. Now basil just is going to go to seed all summer. It's just the way it is. But you do want to try and get to it so it focuses more on the plant. Pruning is also going to help it continue to come back. So here are the rules of pruning. Yes, you could at the end of the year pull this whole plant out, but you're going to get more if you're pruning and preserving throughout the season. So how do you go about this? I'm going to cut with scissors today just so you can see what I'm doing better, but you don't need scissors. You can just use your hand. You're going to take your basil and you're going to prune it about 1/3 of the way down. And you don't want to just cut it anywhere random. You want to cut it where you see it having two emerging symmetric leaves. I'm going to show you close up. Okay, so as we go down this leaf, you can see right here, there are leaves where the stem goes down, where two leaves are emerging on the stem. Two tiny ones right there, and that is a good spot to prune. Even one more down, they have the same thing going on. You don't want to prune just in the middle. You want to prune right above where you have emerging tiny leaves. Okay, so I'm going to do that on this plant. Remember, you go about 1/3 of the way down where you can find some emerging leaves. I'm going a little bit further on this one. There we go. And if you can't find any that are small and emerging, that's okay. Just go about 1/3 of the way down. and still just find another. See, this one still has this one has very small emerging ones, so small you probably be hard to see on the camera. But it still is where there's 2 leaves splitting out. That's still a safe place to split. So this is nice and pruned. I've got this much trimmed off. It's not very much, but that's great for if you're cooking, if you're using it for dinner and you want to use it fresh, and even if you just want to dehydrate little by little throughout the summer. All right, now we're gonna head back into the kitchen and I'm gonna show you the next steps. This is what I did with my harvest from last week. I'm gonna show you what I did next and we're gonna go into the drying process. Super easy. I'm gonna show you how. Okay, we are back at the house. I have got my basil and I have got my rack. I do not have an actual dehydrator, but I do have an air fryer that has a dehydrator setting. So we are going to be using that today and we're going to dehydrate it using this little rack that comes with it. Okay, so now that we've got it back at the house, the first thing that I want to do, it's already getting limp. It's good to do this as quickly as possible. I'm going to separate the leaves from the stems and then I'm going to rinse it in lukewarm water gently and then we'll dry it off. Now I'm left with that stem and a little bit of that flowering part on top. There are little tiny leaves I could try and get, but that's what we're gonna wanna do. Any leaves that you find with damage on them, you can just toss those to the side. You don't wanna use those. And it's good that we're going to rinse these. We want to just make sure that they're nice and clean before we are dehydrating them and using them for whether we're using them for the herbs or the tea. This one is going to be for our tea. Just want to make sure it's nice and clean. And that's what we always want to do with our produce. Even when we've grown it in our own garden, it's good when you're preserving something just to make sure it's clean and get any bacteria or fungus off of it. The best you can by just rinsing. All right, now it is time to rinse our leaves. All right, I just rinsed off our leaves. I'm going to take them and pat them dry. We do not want them wet when they go into the dehydrator, the best we can do. Now, as we get them dry, we want to set them onto our drying rack. And I don't want these leaves to overlap. I want them to all have their own space in here and to not be over top of each other, but just next to each other so they can all dry evenly the best we can. All right, while I'm finishing this up, let's talk about temperature. We want our dehydrator at 115 to 120 degrees. You don't want it too hot and you don't want it to take too long either. The hotter that you do this and the way that you dehydrate really will affect the flavor. And sometimes it's okay. Like sometimes the flavor change is actually what you want. But it will affect the flavor and you actually can take some flavor out depending on the herb. So when you're dehydrating herbs, you want to be careful with the temperature and the length of time that you dehydrate it for. As soon as you can crumble basil with your hand, that's when you know it's good. You're done dehydrating it. So I wish I could give you an exact time on how to do it. It just changes depending on the method you're using. Now, people have different opinions on how to dehydrate, whether you do that in the sun, you use an oven, whether you would use a dehydrator. An oven is faster. It could take anywhere between just a couple hours. A dehydrator might take 4 hours, could take 8 hours, could take 10 hours. Sometimes people dehydrate, it could take up to 24 hours. It just depends on what exactly you're using to dehydrate. Using the air fryer, it seems to just work quickly because of its small area. So we'll see how this goes and hopefully it'll do it nice and even and it will only take until this evening. Here we go. None of it's overlapping, or at least to the best of our abilities. We're going to set it into the dehydrator, check it every hour, and hopefully within a few hours, this will be all done. Okay guys, so by the time that these got done, it was later in the evening and I didn't even get this jarred up until the next day. So I'm going to show you a picture of what it looked like when it was all dried. It ended up taking about 10 hours. I didn't get a ton. I'm going to show you what we do next here. And I knew that was going to happen. I got even less with some of the, I didn't end up drying the original Genovese basil that I picked. I got some more a few days later. You can hear it in there, but it's just a tiny bit and I'll just build it up over the summer. The next part is super simple. As you can see, they're still in big chunks, but they're dried. And so all you have to do as you get to this point is you can just take your hand and crush it into smaller pieces. You could blend it, you could crush it with your hands. It is very, very easy. You can hear how crunchy it is, and it will just break up into little pieces. And I'm gonna do that so that way it is in smaller pieces that it's easier to use. It doesn't necessarily matter when you're doing things like with tea, but it does matter when you are cooking it in sauce or things like that with the Genovese, because you don't necessarily want the big leaves. Not that they can't break down and get smaller, but it's just something you want to sprinkle and have in a smaller, to be less coarse. You can sprinkle it over sauce, pizza, whatever that you're using it for. It breaks down so much, it's so silly when you see it, how little is in the Genovese. This I got a lot more of. This I got a lot more of. I still need to break that down more. Sometimes we like the idea of growing things, but we don't always know how to use them or what to do them with. So basil is a really easy herb to start with. I recommend it for anybody who wants to start growing herbs. You can direct sow it and you're gonna have most likely real great success with it. Genovese is always a safe basil to go with. If you want to try some of the sweeter ones, the holy basil, or I think it's called Tulsi basil, is different than what I'm growing. I'm growing the blue spice. Those are sweeter. There's cinnamon basil, which is amazing. That can be used even on ice cream and in desserts. There's so much you can do with basil. She's one of those really great herbs. You can eat every part of it, leaf, stem, whatever. So thank you guys for watching this video. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy. If you try this on your own, just remember every dehydrator is going to be different, whether you do it in the oven or whether you have a dehydrator. Mine took about 10 hours. Just make sure that it has that really good crunch so that you can grind it up into little pieces. You can use other tools to do it, but your hands work just fine. So it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. It's really simple and really awesome. And guys, I hope this is something you'll give a try, and it's really, really cool, and it just feels like so awesome to be able to grow your own herbs and dry them, to have them all year in a little piece of your garden with you as you cook and bake even in the winter. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to the channel. Please give this video a thumbs up, and please share these videos. It's really a great way to support me in creating this content for you. So until next time, guys, we'll see you soon.